Good evening and welcome to the February 19th Prince George's County Board of Education fiscal year 2020 budget work session. Before we begin this evening, I would like to ask everyone to silence or turn off your wireless communications devices as they may interfere with the taping of the meeting. Ms. Berkeley, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ahmed?
Present.
Ms. Boozer-Strother?
Present.
Mr. Burrows? Ms. Eubanks? Mr. Montero? Mr. Murray? Ms. Page? Ms. Queen? Ms. Shepard? Mr. Thomas? Mr. Valentine? Mr. Wallace? Ms. Williams? Dr. Thornton?
Present. The Board of Education has convened this evening for the sole purpose of discussing the fiscal year 2020 budget. The work session this evening is the third and final budget work session that this board is conducting to develop budget submissions for consideration by the county executive and council. The purpose of these budget work sessions is to fine-tune the budget proposals sent to us by our CEO, Dr. Monica Golson, so that it meets all of our high priorities and represents the best spending plan that will serve all of our student staff across the county. This evening, we'll focus on schools, academics, communications, community engagement, and the CEO office itself. I'll now turn the session over to Dr. Golson for an opening statement regarding this evening's discussion. Dr. Golson.
Thank you. Good evening. On December 13th, I presented my CEO proposed budget for the 2020 school year. In that request, it was $46 million for employee compensation, $4.2 million for student and staff safety, $12 million for K-3 class size reduction. I had a $19.3 million reduction in central office, which helped to offset the total cost requested to the county council in the amount of $45.5 million, which is $43.5 million above the required maintenance of effort that the county government is required to provide, which is only $2 million. For this evening, as stated by our board chair, we will begin with school support and leadership, and then followed by 3 other departments for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Golson, let me take this opportunity to thank you and your staff for the engagement with the board over the past 3 sessions and now this one. I particularly want to thank your CFO for responding to board member questions. He's there. Thank you, sir. And board members, I want to thank you all for the many questions that you've submitted and responding to the responses that you've gotten from the school system. I think it positions us well for the difficult decisions that we have to make in 2 days now. So I want to thank everyone for participating in this very important process. I will now ask my colleagues to begin with their questions. We'll have 2 rounds each. The first round will be 5 minutes from board members, and then the second round will be 3 minutes. And I'll recognize board members as you seek recognition. Any questions from members of the board regarding these aspects of the budget? Any questions? Ms. Ahmed.
Dr. Golson, I know that we follow a student-based budgeting formula for our schools, for the majority of our schools, in deciding how to allocate funds. I'm wondering, has there been any review since your tenure as interim CEO to the formula, to the locked positions and locked plus positions and unlocked positions to see whether or not we need to rearrange based upon the needs of our schools and our students?
For the FY 2020 request, we have had a brief discussion about SVB and made the decision not to make any changes for FY 2020. We will, after concluding the presentation of our budget to the county council, begin the conversation of where we need to go for FY 21. One of the things that I most recently shared with our elementary principals is that we continue to increase the number of locked positions. And when when we continue to increase the number of lot positions, we are then moving away from a truly autonomous budget process, which SBB initially was intended for. And so we will begin the process beginning in April to have conversations about what other jurisdictions use as a model, and then just to make an executive decision to determine if the SBB model is the appropriate one for FY21.
So essentially in 2021, we might be looking at a completely different model other than student-based budgeting.
We'll do an analysis, and then I'll be able to come to you sometime at the beginning of next school year to let you know what that analysis revealed and what we believe are our next steps.
Okay, I would just say that there's been so many folks that, as you've been here at our different budget hearings and budget work sessions, talking about the need for different types of employees, whether it's school nurses, whether it's bus drivers, whether it's mental health supports and ESOL specialists and all these different groups of folks. And I wonder, is there a better way, is there a better formula for us to address some of those dire gaps and needs that we have in staffing?
So I do want to add, I do want to note that even in the previous budget structure that we had, those positions still were not part of that required number that schools received. So we still would have to tackle that outside of whatever existing process we came up with.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from board members? We're focusing on schools at this point. Well, I guess all questions about schools. Mr. Burrows.
Dr. Coley, I want to first thank you for your leadership of the schools. Since you've taken over, I've noticed tremendous improvement at the way that that office functions. I'm so happy that it's aligned, that you have the instruction director who has elementary school experience over the elementary schools, middle school, and so forth and so on. I mean, I think it's been a remarkable operational improvement, that division, as well as the charter school addition, has made a world of difference, I believe, in the way that we're moving forward. My question is on page, well, it's 254, the classroom teacher supplies. In 2019, it was, there appears to be a reduction from the FY 2019 estimate to the 2020 proposed. If you could speak to that.
Yes, there has. Thank you, Mr. Burrows, for your comment. And I have to begin by saying, too, is I thank you to the team that is supportive of the work from the area offices and schools as well. So thank you for your comment, and thank you to them as well. With respect to the reduction in supplies, what we do each year is look to see what the expenditures have been from the previous year. And if, in fact, we see that there has been a problem with the actual expenditure process, and that there are funds remaining, that gives us reason to note that it is not necessary that we continue with what was previous. So that is where you would see a reduction in moving forward.
My time is still going, by the way.
That's okay. I'll give you time. Go ahead.
Hold it.
I'll give you time.
I just want to add to that. When we did the line-by-line analysis for every department and division, what we found was that school supplies fell in multiple areas, not just school support and leadership. It actually fell in several other divisions. And so we had a discussion with Mr. Herbisman about actually looking at what it is total. So we'll go back and look and see what that total amount is across the system, because this is only for one division. And then the other piece of it is just to acknowledge and once again reiterate the fact that we have utilized or redirected central office funds so that individual teachers could be reimbursed for the supplies that they purchase for their classrooms as well.
You know, whenever I visit schools, I hear directly from the teachers that they are constantly having to go into their own pockets and purchase supplies, or they're running out of paper, or I've just heard so many stories about the need for an additional resources in school supplies. And so if there are other places in the budget where there are supplies outlined, if you could collect all of that and come up with a number to show that there isn't a reduction, or maybe we need to articulate the process on how to receive supplies in a different way. But I'm very interested in restoring that amount or increasing that amount significantly, because we cannot continue to expect our teachers to do what they're doing right now. It's not sustainable for them.
We'll show you where they are, because there's also a line item in curriculum and instruction and student services.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Ms. Queen.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Golston, and to your team, I have questions about classroom support also. Not only with support, even with supplies. And we heard Mr. Burrows talk about how some teachers do have problems with supplies, and it's not all teachers. And I'm wondering, maybe it's something that the management of the schools that maybe come from the administration on down, where some of these issues could, and have we ever thought of tackling it that way to see what schools teachers are having these issues with? And maybe it is only some teachers who are not getting certain supplies, just like any job where some teachers can get anything they want. And then it's the favorites that do that, but then it's some teachers that don't. And realistically, that happens in the real world. So we need to make sure that's not happening within our school system. So if teachers are having issues, and I do hear that some teachers are, we need to tackle that and make sure it is not being preference is not being given to some teachers. So that's one of the first things I want to suggest. The next thing is far as supplies, as far as bathrooms, toiletry, and stuff like that. I've been to a lot of schools myself, and I've heard from a lot of people complaints with supplies not being available. If we want the kids to be at school on time, if we want the teachers not to be sick, we need to have an overflow of supplies, from toiletry, from hand sanitizer, and that's very important. So I'm wondering, what are we doing to make sure that these supplies are available? Parents should not have to buy tissues and things for their kids. They pay tax dollars already. A lot of these supplies should be available. So I'm wondering, what are we doing to make sure, because a lot of schools are saying it's a shortage, they're waiting for maintenance. What are we doing to make sure that we don't have a backlog of that? And I've asked this once before about, have we taken a log of the facility to see in maintenance what we have available? Do we need to restock? What's going on with that?
With respect to there being some teachers that receive items and those that do not, that is not the expectation. Equity is to be given to every classroom teacher with respect to the supplies that he or she is in need of. We also, with the support of the instructional directors and for the associate superintendents, if in fact there are instances where a school has submitted a work order in requesting materials and there's somewhat of delay, they are ensuring that the appropriate individuals are aware and the provision of those needed materials does in fact occur. So we're not suggesting that in some schools they will receive more so than others, but we are basing it upon the need itself.
Okay, that's good. And then I have another question. What I also know, when we talk about leadership support, you will go into some schools, and I'm just going to throw out a name like Robert Gray, everything may be just running well from the office to the administration to the floor is clean, the classroom, and then you'll go into another school, and I don't want to throw out another school because it may be the wrong school, and the floor may be dirty and everything is not run well. How are we grading the principals, the ones to me who are in charge of running these schools, when they're not looking out, because that's their building, when they're not looking at to make sure the maintenance is doing, the upkeep of whether it's the outside or the inside, when they're not looking at to see whether we have toiletry in the bathrooms, because they're getting paid good money and they should be doing this. How are we grading them on things like that? Or when the teachers are saying, hey, we don't have supplies, how are we grading or giving the principals? I'm really curious at that.
Not necessarily grading them, Ms. McQueen, but what we are in fact doing is going through each building and assessing the needs themselves. Again, to reiterate, the instructional directors and the associate superintendents as well, they go and they conduct site visits at each school setting, and if in fact there are needs based upon what you've just described, it is certainly communicated, and the expectation is that it is addressed.
How often is it communicated? If you go to the school and it's more than one time that it's being done, do we not realize maybe we need a new principal at that school? Maybe it's not working. I'm just curious how often it's being elevated, because I look at a social, economic justice. Our kids deserve the best at every school, not just at some school. And when we have principals in some school who's not taking a pride in their school like they should, then maybe they don't need to be a principal. They don't need to be overseeing, or certain schools overseeing a lot of babies. So how are we looking at that?
So let me just add to that. All of our principals can receive a mid-year and an end-of-the-year evaluation. That's part of their negotiated agreement. What we can do is provide you a copy of their evaluation so that you see it's in a variety of areas, not just the physical plant, but also the financial responsibilities that they're expected to do, but more importantly, as instructional leaders, how they're supporting the academic program.
We also use, Mr. Queen, the climate survey results. The climate survey results are as well utilized to ensure that our buildings are receiving priority. Cleanliness is one of the areas that is denoted within that climate survey document.
Thank you so very much, ladies.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Yes, Ms. Williams.
Good evening. My first question is around the one-to-one device outlay. Where are we with having our schools be one-to-one? What percentage do we have that schools have one-to-one devices?
We have 11.
11? And there's a goal to increase that number?
In information technology, I think in their measurable outcomes, he had from 11 to 20, I think.
11 to 20. And there is a challenge for those schools that have the one-to-one, and I thought it was under this category. So if I'm out of category, I apologize, because it has computers and equipment in it. There is a challenge with keeping up to speed with those devices. Could I get some information on the plan, or is there a process in which the old ones come out and the new ones come in?
So I'll ask Dr. Watts to submit with our refresh, we call it a refresh plan, to submit it as a response back to this budget session.
Okay, that would be perfect. And so my next question is around the athletic department. Does that fall under this category? Okay. A few years ago, we talked about having medical assistance at our athletic games. How are we doing with that? Are we having more support with our athletic support? Our athletic games, do we have more medics available for those games?
I would have to check on that,
Okay.
Ms. Williams, and get that back to you. I'm not quite certain as to how many are staffed during each event, but I can certainly get some data from and to, so that I would have some data to share with you with respect to that question.
Okay, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions in this category, colleagues? Dr. Golson and Dr. Coley, there is general concern about a perception of unevenness in terms of school performance, and I guess budgetarily, are you all comfortable that we have adequate fiscal support for the accountability that you need to ensure that there's common performance across our schools?
So let me speak to that. I would definitely say no. That is part of why we have to continue to galvanize our community and our elected officials and our staff to really talk about and advocate for additional funding as identified at the state level, whether it's through Kerwin or other forms, to make sure that we are provided the per pupil expenditure that we're expected and need in order to make sure that we provide the supports for our students. We support 91% students of color, and we are 64% free and reduced meals program application school system. That requires additional funding to make sure that we provide a level playing field so that our students receive the same kind of support that any student would across the state of Maryland.
Thank you. That's very important. We are about $600 million underfunded, so we want to continue to make the best case that we deserve those funds. And I just want to thank you all and this board for the effort that we're making to achieve that status. But the public has to know that we have a $600 million gap. This board is going to do its best to use the resources that we have effectively and efficiently. That's what you see here being discussed. But we also want to make the case for the $600 million that we don't have on behalf of our children. Other questions? Mr. Burrows.
Dr. Coley, I do have a concern about the persistently low-performing schools, the schools that perform low every year, and they've been performing low every year for over 15 years, 20 years, 20, 15, certainly the last 10 that I've been on the board, it's the same cluster of schools. What in this budget is being proposed to disrupt that cycle?
As you can see on page, one of the pages, it speaks to one of the priorities from my department with regard to the provision of additional professional development opportunities, professional learning. What we have given a clear focus, an intentional focus on, is working with schools on analyzing performance data. We have provided systemic during our leveled principals meetings. We also afford schools an opportunity to themselves share information with respect to their performance data, as well as share that same information collectively with their colleagues. Professional learning has been one of our gateways for addressing the performance of schools. The instructional directors themselves and the associate superintendents are engaging in retreats amongst their offices so that they too can look to the performance of schools, look to see what the next steps need to be, and to be more aggressive in terms of the approach that's utilized with each school. We certainly understand your concerns. They are our concerns as well. And our expectations is to see ultimately an increase in all schools' performance data.
And are those new things that we're doing, or are those kind of what we always do? I guess I'm trying to figure out, we're talking about disrupting a very dangerous cycle in some of these communities. And so I guess what I'm looking for is what, like an intervention, or do we need to work with the union so that we can pay more skilled teachers to teach in some of these schools? Or I guess what the strategy is for the persistently, could you speak to that some?
I can. I can continue to reiterate the fact that data ultimately is intended to inform instructional practice. And what we have found that is one of the ways by which we will address it by school. During meetings, during site visits, during conversations, during goal-setting meetings that are held with each respective principal. The instructional directors hold goal-setting meetings with all principals at the beginning of the school year. Those goals are aligned to their performance data. They also revisit the same conversations throughout, but also during mid-year and end of the year. So the expectations are that those goals create deliverables, which ultimately will be aligned to increase student performance. So the goal-setting conferences that occur at the beginning are drivers to the work that has to occur over the course of the school year.
I just wanted to add to that. One of the things that we have done and been intentional about this year is really the types of data that our schools look at and analyze. And during the board retreat that will take place on Friday and Saturday, you'll see the samples of the school performance plans for elementary, middle, and high school. Those plans have a wealth of data, because we have stressed that you have, in order to make decisions, you have to have data in order to make those types of decisions. And so you'll have an opportunity to see those templates. On this Monday, the 25th, is the next systemic principals meeting. And our principals will get their populated templates with their school-specific data to help to inform them on making decisions on specifically what they need in reference to their student-based budget process.
Thank you. And I would like, at the conclusion of the school year, to see what those goals were at the beginning of the year, and to see how these our lowest performing schools, how they did at the end of the school year.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Queen.
Going back into a question, I hear you say about data, but what innovative teaching technologies and strategies are we using? Data is fine, but as a grandmother of a 6-year-old grandchild, when she comes to my house, she has the computers, we go to the library, she has things that help her pronounce and read and do phonics, but unfortunately she doesn't have that at her mom's house because her mom don't have the things I have in my house. But what innovative teaching technologies and strategies that we have for these kids that we can support them, not only in the schools, but in the home environment also? That's a big part of helping these kids to succeed, because we're not doing all the data. Training all the teachers may help a little bit, but once they're at home and the summer's here, they're not constantly getting that help. So do we have any other innovative teaching technology or strategies that's going to help them get to the 21st century like they need to get?
Well, and you said an operative word, which is strategies. And during each of those meetings that are occurring, we talk specifically about the data itself, and then we also speak to our colleagues in the Office of Curriculum and Instruction, who during each meeting, they actually share those opportunities with us and provide intentional strategies for the purpose of the principals to take back to their schools. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now. I also had an opportunity to join Dr. Jackson during a parent meeting at John Carroll. And during that meeting, parents asked similar questions. So what they were sharing is some of their needs, which sounds somewhat like what you just expressed. But the common thing that we have shared with our parents as well, that they should go to the schools, speak to the principals, as well as speaking to our principals about providing curriculum nights and opportunities for strategies so that the parents and teachers alike can share the same things that are actually occurring in the school that can be transferred to the home.
Thank you. Dr. Golson and Dr. Coley, I think it's generally accepted that some of the most important drivers of academic performance on the part of students is culturally based. In the old days in our school system, we were known for Comer-based driving of parental community academic performance on the part of our students. Do we expect this type of thing to emerge from the community schools concept? The reason I'm asking that is because we do know that unless you have the effective parental engagement supported by proper social workers, psychologists, community engagement, business community engagement, as Ms. Queen points out, students spend as much time away from school as they do in school. So do we expect from our community schools concept the evolution of those kinds of drivers? And hopefully in future years we'll be able to support this budgetarily. But I think that's what I hear our colleagues asking for. The most important thing that the community needs to know is we've done it before, and I'm sure that we're going to do it again. But that's my comment and question.
To answer your question, Dr. Thornton, yes, that is correct. The provision of wraparound services, the provision of extensions to the school day, students receiving that additional support, and parents alike being a part of this process.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, let's go to the next section, which is academics. Any questions from the next section on academics? Any questions? Yes, Mr. Murray.
Could you talk a bit about the system's thought process around extended school days, specifically as it pertains to our lower performing schools? You know, Mr. Burrows has asked over the years since I've been on the board about our plan around those schools. Could you speak to the administration's philosophy or what we're doing around looking at expanding the school day for some of those schools?
So actually, we'd have to do some research, have our research and evaluation team do an analysis of that. Ultimately, to extend the school day would mean that we'd have to go back to the table with two of our labor partners so that we could negotiate what that would look like. Have we explored that under this term thus far? No, we have not. But we actually have on our executive level discussion on Tuesday really a process of how we select what areas of evaluation, research evaluation we'd like the team to pursue for the upcoming school year. And so we'll discuss if this is an area they'd like to put on the list.
Yeah, I'd like to ask if you could look into that, look at the costs associated around extending the school day even for one school so that the board could get a sense of what that might look like monetarily. I definitely understand the labor implications, but as a teacher with an extended school day, you know, my kids are in school from 7:45 to 4. I mean, it makes a big difference. I mean, I can't imagine losing 2 or more hours, which would put us on par with what the school day is for elementary schools in Prince George's, and expect to still make the same meaningful academic achievement. And so I would love administration to look into that. I would love to explore what we could do around that by June in the June budget.
Yes, Ms. Ahmed.
Welcome to Dr. Livy. I had one question in regards to early learning. One of the expected outcomes that I would really like to see as it relates to this particular section is reapplying for the Head Start grant. Is that in the plan for the coming school year?
No, it's not. Head Start was turned over to 2 organizations, so that's not part of academics anymore.
Is there a reason why we are not looking to reapply?
So when the application became available, it was for birth to age 5, which was 2 years ago when the application finally, well, actually a year and a half ago when the application became public. We actually worked with 2 of the 3 external vendors who now have been awarded that Head Start grant because they had the capacity to provide that kind of support from birth to age 5. 2 of those were Easter Seals and the Laurie Center. We worked with them on their submitting of the grant, and they now are working with us to secure locations within PGCPS to provide services and support for students aged 3 to 5.
Okay. And then my next question is about career and technical education. I see here as an expected outcome that according to the More Jobs for Maryland Act, by 2025, we want 45% of our students to have completed a CTE program, earned a credential, or complete an apprenticeship, and right now we're at 12.7%. Is there anything that we're doing, a new model that we're trying to get to that place of 45%?
Yes, I've been meeting with the Career and Technical Education team. So a couple of things. We're trying to have some completer programs through Creative Arts and through some of our academic programs. So that will take care of our academics, creative arts, and also help with the CTE completers to help to increase those numbers.
Okay. It's just, I think, so many of the folks in my community that I've spoken to really value not only just being college ready, but being career ready. And the more that we can offer our students and our families in being able to get technical education, I think the better. But, and I understand we had a presentation from the board at a work session, a year ago or something like that, that talked about how we have so many CTE programs and career academies, but they may not be completely filled up. And so when we have under-enrolled programs, maybe we need to rethink the model. And so I would urge a rethinking of the model for the coming school year to see how we can reach students and be able to provide them with the education needed to be able to develop some of these certifications and credentials if it's not the way that it is now, if it doesn't work in the way that we're presenting it now.
And also we have a proposal for a CTE Evening Program for the northern area.
Is that the same one as, is that a program that's looking to also alleviate overcrowding? Is that the same program?
Yes and no. So it's to help the overcrowding in the northern area, but also to give students more opportunity. So for example, a student can do an apprenticeship during the day and then take his or her courses in the evening, but also to open up those opportunities and advantages for students so we can help students in the northern area.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to add a clarification. So through our CTE Task Force that has several board members, external and internal staff members on that CTE Task Force, there have been recommendations to look at strategies that are off school hours to help to make sure that we provide opportunities that deal with overcrowding, but at the same time help to increase the number of students who are participating. The program that Dr. Libby is referencing is one that will be piloted at Bladensburg High School. That task force has made several recommendations, and this is just one of the 2 recommendations that was made by the task force. And then I also want to add as an additional strategy, one of the things that we did this school year was actually through our fire cadet program, we looked at why there were such low numbers at Gwynn Park High School versus Charles Herbert Flowers. And the location of the fire departments are very strategically located so that the location is not an issue. But what we found is that our students prefer to enter a program at grade 9 instead of grade 11 because they don't want to leave their base school in order to then enter into a specialized program. And so what we did this year is for Gwen Park, started the program at grade 9. And working through a subcommittee, was able to offer it to students. We started with the recruitment last school year in the spring for 8th graders. And we are proud to have students who are participating now at Gwen Park for the Fire Cadet program earlier. And so they don't have an issue of they went to their base school and now they have to leave to go to Gwen Park. That is their now home school.
That's it. Other questions, colleagues, from this section? Please, Ms. Williams. Academics? 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 Please talk into your mic.
I have a question on the creative arts section. That's under you, correct? Okay. In the expected outcomes, we speak about a 20% increase in the artistic complexity. Can you give us a little bit more description on what you plan to do at each level to increase the artistic complexity? Because what I'm seeing in the schools in District 9, that art has been integrated in a lot of the schools, in math and science and a lot of things, and I'm getting very positive feedback. So what are we doing to help increase that? What does it look like?
So one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that arts is embedded across all of the content areas, especially with the fine arts. And so everyone has, are part of the professional development, they collaborate, they talk to one another. And this year I've asked the teams to go out and spend more time in the schools to see what the teachers are doing and to do that hands-on with teachers, and also to increase the professional development. So we're still working on creative arts, and I've asked the team to take creative arts to the 22nd century, and we're gonna come up with a plan to do that.
I think it's a good thing. For example, at one of my schools, it's an elementary school, they did a story about Cinderella, and each class took on a different country, and through that the kids had to create a shoe, talk about the shoe, and in that they talked about the culture, talked about currency and different things. And I thought that it was a great opportunity to infuse art in public speaking with sociology, and so I thought it was great. It's easier in the elementary levels. In the middle and high school levels, it's a little bit more challenging, and so I'd like to see, and it can come at a future in some of the responses, how we plan to do that, to increase that. I'd love to see us do that. Also, you talk about, in the second bullet about expected outcomes, you define, I would like to have you define what you mean by make a one-level improvement in the district. What does that mean?
So I believe we responded to that question, but it's almost like a scale.
Mm-hmm.
So a person or the arts teacher or class might be on a basic level, and we want to increase the arts integration. We want to, again, embed the arts across the content areas, something like you just described. If it's through dance, it could be dance through social studies, science, math. So we want to make sure that teachers are taking it up a notch and recognizing the arts.
Mm-hmm. So the level is something that we're designating. It's not something that is through some arts institution that grades it or something like that. It's something that we're saying you're taking it up a notch, PVCPS.
Correct.
level.
We're going in
Okay.
to help the teachers, but it is through the National Arts Council.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Golson, do we notice any impact on differences in supplemental budgets that are available at the school level that's self-generated on academic outcomes and availability of resources and supplies, et cetera?
So through student-based budgeting, there is a process that allows schools to make a request for additional funds to support specific academic programs, or we call it a small school subsidy, if they need additional support. That request or application is then submitted to the instructional director, associate sup, and chief, who then review and then make additional allocations to that school's SBB. Most of those requests are all academic related. Typically, there are sometimes a request for a specific staff position that might be from a 0.5 to a 1.0.
But I'm also speaking of budgets that are generated at the school level, not budgets, but fund sources that are school-based, not coming from the central office. I don't know if the magnitude of the issue is like it used to be, but some of those budgets were very, very large.
Yes, no, it's not at the magnitude it used to be. And really, our internal audit continues to monitor to make sure that any amount that's over a certain threshold, which in this case is $10,000, is then submitted via check to the school system, and then it goes through the use of regular processes to access those funds, so that only approved vendors can be used to access it. It also allows us an opportunity to keep a record of if we have schools that are receiving those large amounts.
Things have changed. Ms. Queen.
I have a question. Ms. Ahmed mentioned something earlier about it being a shortage of about students in some of the programs. But have we looked at what areas students are coming from to attend these programs, and maybe the program is more needed in Central instead of North, or instead of South, or vice versa? Have we taken a look at that and see if that made a difference?
Actually, we have for the CTE programs, and the team and I are we're going to meet again, and we're going to look school by school to see what programs are working, what programs are not. And also the team has increased their marketing this year, and I don't know if you noticed recently, it's CTE month now in February. So they've been going out to each school to recognize CTE teachers and students. But you're correct, we need to look at each program and where the students are and the interest of the students.
And one last question is, being so in the interest of the students, in certain parts of our county, we have more students who preferably are ready to go to college, and they will be going to college. But in other parts of the county, kids just want to go to work. They want out of their parents' house. They've had a hard time. Have we thought of bringing most of the programs, making more programs available to students in that area so they can succeed?
Yes, you must be coming to our meetings. We are launching the Apprenticeship Program, and that's going to be launched this year for 11th graders, and they will be working with our maintenance department. So again, you're correct, we're looking at those careers to help students get ready for a career and or college, because some of these careers, they can still get a college degree and vice versa. So, but we're making sure that we're having those opportunities again for all students.
I'm sorry, and I did say last question, but as I was thinking, a lot of times some of the programs go by grades, and sometimes some kids take a little longer to mature, and their grades may not be at the 2.0, but eventually they will graduate, and they need some sort of career. So are these programs according to grades, or are we trying to train these kids and make them ready for the workforce?
We're doing both.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And just want to add, at the conclusion of taking our CTE courses, they have to take what's called a technical skills assessment exam. Passing those exams in many cases will determine where their placement is into the work world industry. And so it's our goal to always make sure that students walk away with that certification, because then it puts them on a different track, and it provides them that financial opportunity that you referenced earlier.
Thank you, Ms. Queen. Colleagues, let's move to the community and communications engagement. Questions in that particular area, Ms. Ahmed? Thank you.
So I'm really excited to see here that there are 300,000 more hours allocated for interpretation. I think it's really very much needed. We have over 24,000 students that identify as English language learners, and over 100 languages spoken in the county with our families. My question here is, what is the plan for that 300,000 hours, and would it be best suited to have those hours, to have those interpreters more in schools as opposed to in central office?
So I can start off, and then Ms. Jennifer Love is here to kind of go deeper into the question. So in general, a couple things happened during this budget process. One, Dr. Golson and the CFO looked through every single line item and every department and division and identified several places in which interpreting hours were being budgeted, but they were being managed by that division. So for example, special education, I think student services had some, schools had some. But they weren't really, what was happening is that the subject matter expert, which is our office interpreting and translation, they were kind of the conduit, but they really weren't deciding on where the hours should go. It was really left to people who really aren't the experts in that space. So one, we condensed and combined all the additional resource that was in these different divisions and put it all into OIT. The second thing we did, which was recognize that it's probably been X number of years since we've actually looked at how to increase that resource given the population increase that we've had. So we increased, I think it was about $500,000, if I'm right, Mike, towards OIT. I can ask Jennifer to go a little bit deeper as to kind of the allocation of how do we get the service into schools, but in general, that was how we came to a much larger number in OIT. And the goal, as I understand it, is we'll do as much as we can internally, which is deploying resources out to buildings for IEP meetings and for sometimes even just front office translations, but the reality is that we still have to contract out a lot of interpreting services given the wide range of languages that we have in our district. And Jennifer, if you can speak a little bit more about kind of what does that service delivery model looks like.
Good evening.
Come on up.
Is there our own button anywhere?
Thank you again for that lead-in, Christian. So with the interpreting services that are provided across the district, we have an internal interpreter bank of 93 interpreters. They're representative of 16 languages. As you can imagine, our most represented language in the district is Spanish. Of the interpreting requests that we receive from schools, we are looking at a little bit over 90% of those interpreting requests being in Spanish. Those interpreting requests are requests that are fulfilled through in-person interpreters. They have to be requested in advance. For those times that there are families who walk into the school building, we have another service called the Language Link Telephonic Interpreting Service, and that allows any school staff to be able to communicate with families when they come in. It also allows teachers to be able to make calls out to families as they need to communicate with them.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for the work that your office is doing. I just wonder, is $500,000 enough? And I think the answer is no to that. My question, I also looked through the budget response packet that y'all had sent over, and I noticed that when it comes to folks like professional school counselors, we have 20 bilingual professional school self-identified bilingual school counselors, and that's nowhere near enough. Given the breadth and expanse of the cultures in our county. And so I'm wondering, has there been thought given to how do we expand interpretation, language services, and bilingual supports beyond the $500,000?
So in terms of that bilingual support, it's not just a problem at professional school counselor level. It's in a variety of positions, and then we're constantly having conversations with our human resource specialists about ways that we can go out and begin to recruit and retain additional employees that are bilingual to support the needs of our community. We're drawing from multiple areas because we're not the only one that has an increase in the number of students who need additional ELL support or ESOL language support. But we are working extensively hard to make sure that we continue to recruit. One of the comments that we received over the past 2 budget sessions is really looking at how we can attract bilingual employees to PGCPS, and our team has been charged with continuing to do that. 20 we know is not as many as we need, but it's far greater than we were several years ago.
Thank you. I would just encourage continued focus on this specific area.
Thank you. Dr. Golson, I guess that's one of the reasons why, it sounds like a broken record, but it's one of the reasons why we need that LEP funding that drives capacity to systems like ours, because our system disproportionately serves Latina, Hispanic students in the state, and so we need formula that drives resources so the expectations of this board can be addressed. Sounds like a broken record, but it's critically important. Other questions, colleagues? Ms. Queen.
Getting back to Mr. Matt's question, I'm just wondering, are we using what we have? Now, you would constantly hear me say that we have students that we teach, we educate, they graduate. Are we using the students that are graduating who already speak bilingual languages, the ones who have taken 4-year Spanish classes? Are we using them as interpreters, as interns? Are we hiring within by using our own? And actually, it's a way of giving them work experience through these types of services.
I'll go first. What you'll find is that many times they're not out of work. They actually are being employed by many other agencies because there's so many people who do need bilingual employees. We do work extensively hard to also still hire from within. Once again, I'm a prime example of that. And so when those opportunities exist, we will do that. But it's important to know they're kind of like nurses. They're a hot commodity. And so they have opportunities that exist that are sometimes outside of the Prince George's County area, and many times are going to pursue their post-secondary experience degrees.
Jennifer, you have, I just say this, we do have some anecdotal evidence. You may have more tangible about the type of employees that are under your shop. Many of them are graduates of the system.
They are. We have about 40% of our interpreting staff, our interpreting team, are alumni of Prince George's County Public Schools, myself included. In addition, we partner closely with LAYC to have interns through the Workforce Development Program. So they start as interns in our office and then become part of the district. I think one important note around interpreting is that anyone who is bilingual certainly has a skill, but everyone who is bilingual cannot necessarily interpret. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind, that it is certainly a skill and a highly cognitively demanding skill that some of our students have certainly demonstrated that they have the ability to do once they have graduated from high school.
Okay, and my next question is getting back to communication and community engagement, which is so important. Have we set or worked on a better policy for engaging and being more transparent with our community, especially when they're trying to go to the schools? We have a lot of organizations that I've been hearing from, even through the campaigning, and even now, they have so much issue trying to partnership or work with certain schools, and it gets back to certain principals if they don't want you in their school or they have their preference. Have we set better policies? Because we need to be engaged with every part of the community. And one of the things I've been really pushing and outreaching to a lot of the different masses and churches, no matter what faith or belief, I just think they need to be more concerned about their students at our schools. But we also got to be more engaging and open to accept this.
So that's a great, fair question. In short, the answer is yes. So Dr. Golson, and under her administration, has done two things that is actually pretty remarkable. One is we've waived the fees for our civic organizations for liability insurance, and that's an important conversation. As I know you know, many organizations have been beating down the doors asking, why do we have to have the liability insurance? It's important to note that that decision wasn't something that was made in a vacuum. It was really on the heels of some of our school safety-related issues. But number two, just last week, I saw Barbara Oldstreeter. Last week, we held a conference call with our sororities and fraternities. And what Dr. Golson ultimately agreed to, and we'll put in writing by March 1, is that for any organization, fraternity or sorority, that is providing some type of academic support or providing some type of character education support, we'll waive the fees for them to work in our buildings for, provided they do that support. Now, obviously, holding their chapter meeting is one thing that they're going to have to still go through the regular facility use process and pay for the lights and pay for our staff. But if you're providing SAT, PSAT, character education, support, tutoring supports for our students, mentoring supports for our students, we'll waive the fees for the sororities and fraternities. And that's a commitment the district is making, because frankly, it's a financial commitment that we're covering the cost of the custodians, we're covering the cost of the lights and everything. But we recognize that there's many organizations. There's one organization, I won't name the fraternity because it's not the one of two of our colleagues up there. But Flowers High School, on Saturday, they were holding a PSAT program for free for our students, but we were charging them to use the facility, and it just didn't make sense. Ultimately, it was bureaucratic, but it didn't make sense. So Dr. Golson's waived that. March 1, a letter will go out communicating that, and our expectation is that we'll open our doors more to our organizations. Lastly is our churches, so, and our business community. So on March 6th, it's important, and the board will get a formal invitation, but we just got notice last week Dr. Golson has been invited to speak in front of the Greater Business Roundtable, and at that meeting, she'll present really a plan to speak to how can we engage better with our community, how can we get our businesses more engaged. And our faith community is the second largest entity, too, that we'll be dealing with. We have some one-off examples, but not a community effort, and that'll be something you see down the road. But yes, the short answer is yes to that.
Yeah, and my last question under this category would be sort of with community engagement and hits a little bit of hurt in the academics. We have to find a better way of the hours we have a certain school if you want the community engaged. Have we looked at schools like Walker Mill, who gets out at 4:30 and it gets dark at 5, and so a lot of the parents don't want to engage, don't want their kids to stay at after-school events because it is too late for them to be walking. We live in a different society where we can't trust our kids out without somebody trying to snatch them, and you know it's human trafficking. Even though they're middle school, we still have to be very careful, so we can't expect them to be out at dark. Have we looked at if we really expect kids to be a community engaged and we really expect our academics to go up, thinking of maybe changing hours at schools like that you know it gets dark early?
So we actually have a process that looks at school bell time changes. They go to the Department of Transportation. They look to determine if it's actually possible to do that. Having 207 schools and having the largest transportation fleet in the county, we have to take into consideration that sometimes the reason the bell times are staggered are so that we can provide that transportation support. There have been times, though, when transportation has made recommendations to communities to change the time, maybe because of increased traffic in a specific area or to meet those kinds of needs that you have said here. So you most recently sent that request via email, and I've responded and said that I am working with our operations team to determine if that process has started and if William Wirt was one of those schools that requested a bell time change.
Well, and another reason why I asked that question also is because in some areas you may have where parents have cars, 2 and 3 cars, and they can pick kids up. But as we know, in the Capitol Heights area, that's not so. A lot of them parents, a lot of them students catch the bus. So if we want to be social justice and economic, if we want to be correct, we need to look at all schools, and especially the areas, and look at the harm and the hurt it could be costing them students because they don't have the 2 parents home. They don't have someone who can pick them up after school. And it's not that they may not want to, they may not be able to. So we really have to start looking at our schools all across the board and think about the different areas of poverty, the different areas where they may be well off, they may not be well off. So we have to look at things as diverse, being diverse and as a different picture.
Can I also mention that this is not a burden solely on the school district. I think it's important to note that our partnership with the county government and Maryland National Park and Planning is critical. So you spoke too about safe passages to schools, and I think you mentioned in a previous conversation, you know, we do not control a couple things. One, crossing guards, that's a county government function. We don't control sidewalks. That's a county government conversation. So Maryland National Park and Planning has in over 80 sites after-school programs, but the reality is that if families don't feel comfortable utilizing the program because of safe passages to school or because of lights on the way home, that's a conversation we collectively can work with our county partners and Maryland National Park and Planning to do. Oftentimes, most of the decisions and the burden of trying to provide the supports are on the school district, but the decisions and actually to enact them or to enforce it is well outside of our reach. We can ask requests, but unless someone at the county government side, DPWT or transportation department, changes a bus stop for the bus, So after school, they can actually get on a bus and get to their community. Those are some of the things that we have to do together as a collective unit. But we firmly agree that having our kids in safe learning environments in and outside of school is critically important if we want them to participate.
I definitely thank you for addressing that because, as you know, that is a big issue, and I did mention that in another email sent today with John Bain Elementary School, the kids trying to cross, elementary school kids going across a 4-lane highway. And I've had several parents say if one kid gets sick, they're not sending the other kids to school. And I don't blame them. I wouldn't send my child to school either as a little child. We have to really start thinking about people, household. We're looking at it earlier where parents are maybe single parents and maybe they don't have anybody else to take their kids. But we expect them to be at school. We expect them to have perfect attendance and we expect them to learn. But we're not providing support for the home environment. And we have to start looking at the big picture and we have to start being more diverse. So I do thank you for mentioning that.
Thank you. Ms. Boozer Struthers. Sorry, comment.
Thank you. And before I ask my questions, I just want to give just a more global thank you to Dr. Goldson and your team for this budget. Again, I think I had an opportunity to say back in December that it definitely, the response to what I've been hearing from many stakeholders in our community is in this budget. And looking at the community partnerships, which is something that I'm personally very excited about, and the work that Barbara Holt-Streeter will be doing. I did want to ask a little more about the school volunteer program. One, just a little more context and expanding upon sort of the vision for that, how it might be different than what we see in our schools today. But second would be the capacity to bring volunteers into our system. Something we've been talking about for a couple of years is the cost of fingerprinting, the actual physical access to sites to get your fingerprinting, how you engage at that point, and the video training that has been difficult for some folks and actually might be a little bit burdensome. And I just want to know what we might see changed in sort of just to be able to have the capacity to process so many volunteers if we have these programs.
So one of the things we did do this year is provided the background, the fingerprinting process in different locations other than the one location that we provided last school year. And so that came from people speaking at the community listening sessions and from emails that we receive asking that we place the fingerprinting process in the northern part of the county so that we do have more people who can access the service. We'll continue to begin to move that around so that we provide opportunities in some hours where people can access it. But one of the things we did, I requested from our team a list of schools and those schools that already had partners. And what we found is that out of our 207 schools, we have 93 that do not have a partner. And that will be a charge that I'll be placing to our business community in that March 6th address, is really asking and making sure that every school feels some type of support. In some places we have 3 and 4 partnerships, and in some we have 0. And so we have to make sure that every last one of our schools can have that sense of support from their community and know that we're all in this together. That does mean, though, that we'll have to look at how we can begin to expedite processes, but at the same time still require those tools and mechanisms to ensure that our children are safe. So we want our external partners to come in, but they can't do it unless they've been fingerprinted and they've done the videos. And so they do have opportunities, just like I do mine at home. That's a choice that I make. I don't do them at work. But it still is a requirement because I have to make sure that our kids are safe with the people who are around them.
And just to close the loop on a couple items that you mentioned. One, Ms. Barbara Holt-Streeter and her team really function for a couple main things. The biggest is the MOUs and the partners that we get as an organization. It's important to note that we had about 6,000 to 7,000 fingerprint requests just of volunteers this year. So to date, and the reality that the overwhelming majority of those are parents. So they're volunteering in their classrooms. They're coming in to go to Camp Schmidt. They're doing volunteers as parents, not as organizations. I think we have a better grasp of how to handle our organizations because they have the liability insurance. They go through a formal process. Ultimately, the responsibility of managing those volunteers is handled by nonprofit X. Where we struggle and we're working to build out a better process through our Raptor 6 upgrade for the module is to how do we work with a parent, right, who volunteers in a particular school every single day just because Johnny is in first grade and they want to be there with them. And how do we make sure that the schools have the resources at their level, not at central office level, to identify that it's okay for Johnny's mom to go on the field trip because she has her fingerprints done, or there was a domestic situation at home and Johnny's dad is not allowed to come for X number of reasons. So the Raptor 6 module, which is something we've been talking about for about a year and some change now, will allow for that database to be accessed by appropriate users. HR actually does an amazing job of gathering that information, but schools right now have to reach out to central office to find out, is it okay for so-and-so to be a participant? So our hope is that in the next couple months we have some more detail we can provide you and also make sure that the word gets out to the community. We've streamlined a lot, but we're not the only district. I just recently asked Barbara and Robin Welsh, how does Montgomery County do it? And the answer was that they don't. And when I mean they don't, is that they struggle too with how to wrap around the arms around parent volunteers. We're doing so, and I hope that we have a better answer, kind of what we're specific steps in the next couple months.
I just want to add for those laymen, Raptor 6 is actually an online identity module that helps us to determine if there are some issues legally with that person being in contact with our students.
Mr. Burrows.
On page 150, there is an additional FTE added, Foundations Relations Officer at $151,000. Could you explain the rationale or the justification for adding that FTE?
Sure. So as you know, we currently have a foundation that provides scholarships to our students and families, or students. I think last year, the last X number of years, we've given about $500,000 worth of scholarships. Right now, that foundation is being run by 6 people individually. Mike Herbstman, Dr. Golson, myself, Barbara Holt-Streeter, and Estelle Ferguson, periodically Shawnee, my assistant Shawnee, and others. We don't have a dedicated staff to run a foundation, and if you look at any district our size, we should be bringing in well over $1 million a year to offset some of the things that are in the operational budget. So right now we're just giving scholarships. We should be providing resources for teacher supplies. We should be doing micro innovation grants for teachers who have great ideas who want to implement it in their buildings. So that's really what this is. The goal is over 3 years. The first year we cover the cost, and over the next 2 years that position becomes self-sufficient. That means the foundation pays for it exclusively. Whoever gets hired, their job is at minimum get over that whatever their amount is. And that dollar amount, just for clarity, is not it's a projected cost. It's not the actual cost of a salary. We just posted the position. We haven't hired, and I actually think based off of where we posted it, it's a much lower salary than what this posted here.
Is this an executive cabinet position?
No, it's actually an ASASP position. I think it's a grade 30 or 32. Yeah, it's an ASASP position.
And so you posted a position, but it's not in the budget?
So, I'm sorry. So we posted a position because, one, we needed to identify someone that actually provide the management of that office. Because right now, if we don't have someone, we won't be able to give scholarships this year. That's a critical piece, yeah.
But you didn't have anyone last year, and you provided scholarships.
No, we actually didn't. We did not provide. We did not do any. We did not do any fundraising opportunities last year. What you saw last year at the last board meeting was MGM actually gave us $250,000 worth of scholarships. We provided some very small from the foundation itself, but no additional fundraising was done last year.
So I'm just trying to figure out. This is being proposed in our budget. I'll follow up offline. My next question, if you could explain on page 100 154, the web services content management system upgrade.
Sure, we can. And I have Max Pugh and Raven Hill here. I'll have Max come down. He's much more better with the data. Here's the short of it. Our website currently is extremely outdated. And we have received several kind of decrees from federal government and others to provide more accessibility. We're the last major district in this region that is running our system the way we do. Fairfax County and Montgomery County are good examples. I think Fairfax spent over $1.2 million for their migration for their website. And they still have a bunch more to do. So I'll let Max talk a little bit more about it, but it's important to know our website is it's not an option. We're required by law to have it. And frankly, I think we just sent out the notice for tomorrow's snow. Our system shuts down literally every time we post for our weather, and that's because our system is so outdated. So I'll let Max give a little more detail as to what this migration will cover and what it costs.
Good evening. So we've had the system since 2005. Some of you out there were probably elementary school back then. It does function. We have kept it up to date and looking in the theme and the feel. Behind the scenes, it has become aged. The company that owns it no longer supports it. So we would like to move into a more modern system that would be more user-friendly behind the scenes. The other counties in the area have already moved on to other products. The increase in the budget really is a model change over the past 13 years, where we used to be able to buy a license and keep it here and pay like $27,000 a year for it. But now it's all gone to subscription services, which most of our phones, Hulu, everything else is subscription. So has the model of websites. And so we pay per visit or per student, and it becomes very expensive. Fairfax paid $1.1 million their first year. Other districts are paying just as much or more for their products. So it's about an average cost of a content management system.
And we have such a large IT department. I mean, this is not something that we can do ourselves.
I have not. I had discussions with IT before, and they would prefer for us to move into the cloud to have our web system be reliant. And we do have our web farm here. We have a set of servers that we've been keeping together for the past 13 years, but that is not the modern model of website development or delivery.
Thank you.
And I just want to note, what you see here is not what we would call the Tesla version. I actually streamlined it so that we could provide something that I thought we could potentially afford for year one. But we have to make changes onto our website, or we will continue to experience what we're experiencing now. It's just, sometimes if you'll go into our website and do a search, it will take you back to websites to sites and pages that no longer even exist.
Understood. My last question for this section, I guess I'm just trying to understand. Right now we have on page 156, admin support specialists. In the 2018 budget, there were 0, and in the 2019 budget, it appears that you're proposing adding 4 additional, going from 0 to 4 admin support specialists.
Yes, so it wasn't not new positions. This is the first year this cost center has actually existed. So last year, the cost center for community partnerships was under the Chief of External Affairs. It was under my office. So if you look at my old office, which isn't in this budget, the positions and the people were there. We just actually pulled it out and created our own cost center, 1, so you could see specifically how much is going to this department and area. And 2, so they can manage their own budget. It didn't make sense for it to go through 3 layers of approval. So that's what this is. And actually, one of these positions is actually a duplicative. So I think we identified that in one of the responses to questions, but it's actually not 4. There's 3 staff. We haven't hired. Actually, I think we only hired 1 staff in Barbara's shop. Everybody else were transfers from other departments, so they weren't new people we hired. We just pulled from, I think, Sheila's shop. We pulled from communications and others, and made an office, because right now at at the time, there was no one place responsible for this one area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Queen, for 3 minutes.
I just have one quick question. I know Edward was asking you about the position. I remember, and help me, we done been over so much, and y'all been throwing so much at me with this budget, but I remember us talking about a grant writer, someone who already did grants, so the grant writer couldn't handle the foundation?
No, so yeah, so there's two different types of grants. That particular office, I believe, was in Doug Strader's shop. It was the Strategic Planning and Performance shop. They handle grants that are $10,000 and above. They're not writers, they're facilitators. What they do is actually pull together, the Department of Labor has a $7 million grant, and they pull the right people in and put the grant together and send it out. That's a process in and of itself. The foundation itself is a completely separate entity. It's a 501c3. It should and must run by itself. Right now, we've been piecing it together internally. We need a staff that can handle the responsibilities of that. That's a separate. They're not writing grants. They're actually they're development. They're bringing in resource and then pushing it out for things that supplement the county's budget.
Dr. Golson, in terms of community engagement, what office handles our strategic engagement with parochial and private schools? And are there budget implications of that responsibility?
Actually, it falls under everyone and then really no one. So our support that goes out strategically would have to come from our communications and community engagement. Have we engaged those non-public or private schools? We have, in reference to what we're required to provide them in terms of additional resources and professional development, which is required by law. Have we reached out to them to begin to attract those students back to PGCPS? That we do, and our actions reflect that on a daily basis. It's part of the open communication, transparency piece that I believe that we have to do ongoing in order to bring communities and students back to our schools. It's the changing the narrative that I speak about all the time, about making sure that we share the positive stories that exist in all 207 schools, so that people understand that the supports and services we provide in public school, you're not always going to get in a private school. That dual enrollment is a great example. A parent doesn't have to pay for that dual enrollment experience in the public school. And so what that looks like in the attainment of a high school diploma and associate's degree, we offer several programs that provide that. It's those kinds of communications that we have to continue to implement and share with our community so that they understand that their own public dollars are going toward our programs that can support their students.
Are there opportunities for you or members of your staff to meet with the leadership of those types of schools? And if so, what are they?
There are always opportunities. Will they arrive and show up? I'm sure they'll come, but also would hope that we would not take their students because that builds into their revenue. At the end of the day, though, I believe that we provide a service where I feel this because I'm a firm believer that public schools provide our students the experience that they need to excel in their post-secondary experience. And I have 2 children that are true examples of that.
So we do have a couple, and Dr. Ghost is not giving herself credit. She actually has met with our and has engaged with, what's the school off in Forestville? Bishop McNamara, the principal, Bishop McNamara. We also have a partnership with the Matha High School. Currently, they utilize our facilities at Northwestern High School for the turf field there. So we engage with the Matha on a regular basis, and that was a partnership, recognizing that we're in a community, and the reality is that they're going to be using our facility one way or the other. Let's find a way to partner. Shabbat Ministries at First Baptist Glen Arden, Reed Temple, they have an aviation program, and they partner with Duval High School. So the short answer is we engage with them probably on one-on-ones. We can and should do a better job of identifying them across the board and how do we kind of galvanize the support. But there's examples like that I can give you down the line of schools and our private and parochial schools that we have relationships with. First Baptist is a good example where they go K-8, and the reality is that the majority of their kids are going to go to our high schools. So how do we engage them on the front end? so that they know where the resources are. And we do that through the MOU we have with them and other things as well. So that's just some tangible examples, but I definitely think we can look at that much deeper and more strategically.
Dr. Golson, I certainly would encourage a leadership concept that adds that to the face of education in Prince George's, because I think there are opportunities there. So our school system is not isolated in that regard. Other questions, colleagues? Okay, this is good. This is good. Dr. Golson, do you have any final comments about these three sections?
No, I do not.
If not, we want to thank you and your staff for your work, and we'll see you all on Thursday. Thank you.
I think we still have a
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna break. We're going to break, and then we'll go
Before we hear from the community. Thank you.
Yeah. Colleagues, this ends this work session, and we'll reconvene in about 30 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Montero, how are you, sir? Hey, you know, that's okay. You all right?